Welcome to another episode of the Successful Encore Career Podcast, brought to you by Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, Nationwide Insurance, Innosource, and our special episode sponsor, The Resume Coach. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer with Employment for Seniors, and with me is Executive Director Carol Ventresca. Hey, Carol.
How are you doing, Brett?
I'm doing great.
This has been so much fun to do our series of podcasts on creating resumes. So this is number 4 for listeners who have missed the first 3. You might want to start at the beginning. But we welcome you, and we want to make your job search more successful. Resumes. We keep saying that they are the hardest part of a job search. So what's important? What's not important? So our 3 podcasts that we've already had have covered things like, what are the basics? What are the purpose of a resume? What to include, what not to include. We've talked about contact information and summary statements and your work experience, volunteer experience, all those bits and pieces. And today we're going to do the most important part. So the best is for last. We're going to talk about accomplishments and skills, and that is critical in developing your resume. Let me welcome our guest today is Sharon Hamersley. And Sharon is the principal coach of the Resume Coach, where she helps job seekers, conduct 21st century job searches. Sharon and I have worked together in the past, and she has been a longtime supporter and volunteer of Employment for Seniors and also the Career Transition Institute. And she also facilitates all of the career workshops sponsored by Employment for Seniors. So Sharon and I go a long way back, and we really appreciate all that you have done to help us make this podcast series on resumes work for us. So thank you again.
You are quite welcome, and I'm so glad to be here, and welcome back to our audience. I really would encourage you to listen to those first 3 podcasts if you hadn't, because you will get some really good information there. But today we're going to talk about accomplishments which are key to your job search.
Right. You know, people think that resumes are just a list of tasks, and we've already talked a little bit about that. That's not what a resume is supposed to do. And the basic goal of a resume is to get an interview. Over and above anything else, it's just to get your foot in the door. That's all it's about. So the primary message that you are giving an employer is going to happen through these accomplishment statements. So Sharon, tell us about those.
Yes, well, the first and probably most difficult part of an accomplishment statement is differentiating between the job duty, the task, which is pretty obvious to everybody. You can look on any job description and you'll see what they are, and the accomplishment. So the job duty is, what are the activities that the job requires? Do you have to answer phones? Do you have to greet clients? Do you have to provide information about financial statements? What is it that you're required to do basically in order to keep your job?
Right.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, an accomplishment is a description of the expected outcome of your required job duties, but it's also any activity that may not be specifically part of your job, but it benefits your company, your clients, or your coworkers. So it could be any of those things. So basically, what you're looking to do on your resume is to get away from just that list of tasks, of things that you've done, and start to explain to the reader what were the outcomes of those. And that can be a struggle, but there is actually something you can do.
So there's a trick to this then?
Yes, there actually is.
Good.
Okay, it's called the STAR method, and that's STAR. So, and that's actually an acronym. ST are for situation or task. And I like to view this as what is the opportunity or the challenge that you have within this. Describe the situation that as you found it, and then the possible challenges or opportunities that arise from that opportunity or challenge. So then the A part of this is the action. How did you work? What did you do? How did you address this opportunity or challenge? So the actions that you take are actually using your skill sets. They validate your skill sets. Did you problem solve? Did you communicate, research, negotiation, all kinds of things? And actually, Carol, we have a whole podcast on transferable skills. There you go. These are your transferable skills. And when you are using them in a STAR statement, you're actually validating that you have used these in the past and can apply them to future situations where they are necessary components of a successful outcome for whatever it is that you need to accomplish.
Right. As an example, in our last podcast, we talked about volunteerism and how important it is to go in and do volunteer work and learn new skills or hone the skills you have or update skills that you have. And so at Employment for Seniors, we have our volunteer job counselors who are, for the most part, HR professionals. They are either retired or they're in job transitions themselves or whatever the change is in their lives. The tasks that they do, the duties are, answer the phone, talk to people, data entry information into the computer. Well, those are tasks. That's not the value that they bring to our organization and to all of our job seekers. They're helping people through the process of job seeking. They are finding resources for them. They are showing them, they're instructing and educating our clients on how to use our job list, on how to use other resources that are on a computer or in written form. So the data entry is not just data entry. It's to ensure that someone's information profile is complete and correct and that they deal with confidentiality issues and all those those are all transferable skills they have brought from their previous jobs into our situation. They could take them to other situations if they choose to go and have a paid position. So it's this normal progression of information that they can provide on their resume.
Yes, and that's exactly right. So when you look at the R, the result part of this, you're basically answering the question, what was the result of your actions? Our volunteer counselors, maybe not everybody gets a job, but, if they just teach someone how to access our job board, and the person accesses it and finds a job and applies for a job. Maybe they get it, maybe they don't. But that's an actual result. Something is different or better or improved because of the actions that volunteer job counselor took. What impact does this have on the company? Sometimes people don't think about that very much. You can think about it, sort of reverse engineer this a bit and say, well, what would happen if I didn't do something well?
Exactly.
As opposed to what if I did something well, or maybe I even went a bit above and beyond, what positive impact is that going to have for the company, the client, the organization, whoever that is? Or even my coworkers, or maybe even myself.
Right. This is really kind of in a nutshell the issues that older adults have in job seeking because they're afraid to pat themselves on the back.
Yes.
And this is not really patting yourself on the back. This is showing proof of the value that you brought to your employer. And so it's just a great way to be confident.
Yes.
You can see what you have done. You can act, when we talk to clients and we go through this with them, all of a sudden you see that light bulb go on and they're like, oh yeah, I did do all those wonderful things.
Yes.
How much better to make your job search.
Yes. People, you will gain if you work the STAR method and you do that repeatedly. You will gain a lot of confidence because things will start to come back to you. Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Right.
So things will start to come back to you that maybe you didn't even remember, but at the time, they really did have a huge impact on the company, on your coworkers, maybe for clients, any number of things. But that is something that really does build your self-confidence.
It does. So when you're going through this and you're building those accomplishment statements, oftentimes it's easy to sort of talk about the task and kind of get ready to talk about the value. And you're looking for quality or quantity or whatever. And all of a sudden they sort of get to that stopping point, like, okay, what is that? How,
yes.
How do you measure that? Nobody told me. I don't know. So let's talk about how do we actually document that quality and quantity?
Yes. So quantity is relatively easy. For all you folks in sales out there, you know what your sales numbers are. And you know how they stack up against other people in the same field. Or, if you're in a production environment, you pretty well know how many widgets per hour you've produced. And that's a good thing. The quality part is, in fact, a lot more difficult to measure. So some ideas for that is how many times have you met or exceeded the requirements for your job? Or, let's take the example, for instance, of somebody who needs to generate a month-end report. Mm-hmm. Okay. Task, it's pretty simple. Generated month-end report. Okay. But there are some qualitative factors involved in that. Okay. If this report is going to be useful for its audience, which is probably management, has to be timely. It has to be accurate. It has to be complete.
Easily read,
easily understood, mm-hmm. and interpreted, all of those things. So if you just wrote an accomplishment statement that said, generated month-end reports 2 days before they were due, that included all information and that included 100% of the required information presented in an understandable format. That's much better than that little generated month-end reports thing right there.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And particularly when it's going up and down the ladder.
Yeah.
So that you're showing you can deal with other audiences. So you've done it to management, you've done it to your peers, you've done it to those working for you.
Yeah.
So it even gives a larger breadth of or span in what you're doing. So okay. I think there are so many instances in that somebody will say, well, I'm not allowed to use that information, or I wasn't ever given that information. But there may be other cues that they've gotten to talk about their success. So for instance, one of the large retailers here in Columbus that closed many years ago used to give out little apples. Every time a salesperson had a compliment from one of the customers, they got a little apple on their name tag. And sometimes you'd see only one, and sometimes you'd see 20 hanging on their name tag. So you may have got, our listeners, you may have gotten an award from your company, or you may have been recognized from a professional association, or if you are volunteering for an organization, you may have gotten recognized from them. Those are ways to think about showing how the value that you've brought to an employer or to an organization, to a volunteer group, or whatever.
Yes, and I think that that's really important for you to stop and think, not just sort of just in terms of numbers, but really in terms of the quality of your work.
Right.
You could be a pretty good, widget maker, but maybe there are things that you did that made widget making better for your coworkers.
Right. Right.
Why would that be? So,
well, I'm going to give one more example, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
There are times when there is no quality or quantity. Yeah. There's nothing to measure. But it goes back to what you just said. You've done something for someone else. So when I had my science students, one of the things they always put down on their resumes, they had to clean the science lab. And I'd always say, well, why? Well, bottom line is, number one, you need to make sure that it's clean for the next group of students coming in so that their experiments are correct. You haven't left some chemical sitting around that didn't get cleaned up that's going to affect somebody else. Or for safety reasons, OSHA regulations, whatever that may be. So there's really not quality or quantity, but if you didn't do it, what impact would there be? So
Yes.
it's kind of, like you say, kind of a backdoor way of looking at it.
Yes, exactly. And there are a lot of people who will just say, but you know what? I was just doing my job.
Right.
And they're like, again, this is the hiding my light under a bushel problem.
Exactly.
But if you think about it, just ask yourself these questions. When have you done more with less? I don't think there's a single person listening today that hasn't had that experience.
Exactly. Not enough resources.
Not enough resources, but I got her done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When have you seen or solved some problem that other people didn't see?
Right.
And that may have impacted you and maybe a couple of other people, but it made your life easier. Maybe it made a couple of other people's lives easier.
Right.
So why not? Many people have actually started a new program or process. They saw a need for something within the company that just wasn't getting done at all, but if it got done, it would be a huge help. So, even as an employee, you may just see that if new employees were just given 30 minutes of training on something that they're not getting right now, they would be productive, I don't know, 20% faster in a much shorter time. So that's something that you can do. And you may not even have any numbers for that, but you
Right.
sure can see that.
But it may have been a number they didn't even think about.
Yeah.
They started something and people were more productive by 10 or 20%.
Yeah.
And they didn't attribute it to what they did. They attributed it to the program.
Yeah.
And yet they were the one who did it.
Yes.
Very
exactly.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah, right. So, if you've ever been a manager, and this isn't just that you had manager in your title, have you had to lead a team of other people? And this could be in your work, but going back to what we talked about in our volunteer experience, we lead teams all the time in our volunteer life.
Right.
And we don't even think about it. We don't think about it. We get a group of people together. We all shovel the dirt out and we get the job done and we don't even think about it. But somebody kind of has to coordinate all of that. It's not that just four people kind of shoveling dirt all on their own. Somebody has to figure out why.
Well, and for our listeners, being a volunteer doesn't mean that you're working in the office every day. We have a team of volunteers in our board. And nonprofit agencies are always looking for great board members. You get fiscal experience, you get organizational experience, you get marketing experience, all the kind. And Brett can attest to this. Brett's been a longtime member of our board. It's just amazing what you do. And oftentimes those board members are working full time.
Yep. So that's a great thing. So, have you ever saved the company money? They may not have noticed it, but I bet you did. I had a client once who saved her company, and she actually did have a number for this. She saved her company in 6 months. She saved them something like $7,500 just by organizing their supply room.
Wow.
Because they were ordering stuff that they didn't need, and they didn't have stuff on hand that they really did need. She saved them $7,500 in 6 months just by organizing the supply room.
That's wonderful.
So, and then finally, have you ever been recognized for your performance? Those apples from the retailer, great example of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We had a meeting here at Employment for Seniors with an employer who this employer has many locations in Central Ohio, had hired one of our clients to be an administrative assistant at one of the locations, and there were administrative assistants at all the locations. And she realized that she was having trouble getting something done. Nobody could kind of really answer her question. So she reached out to another administrative assistant at one of the other locations. Well, suddenly then they both had another question. They just kept reaching out to where they actually created their own little administrative assistant group. And they are making all of the locations more effective, more efficient. And the owner is sitting here telling me what this added to their company. Wow. How much better is that on a resume?
Yes, that's all better on a resume. So don't think that you were just doing your job. Think about what you have actually done in your job that has made your job better, your company better, a better work environment for your coworkers, better services to your clients, whatever it was. You have actually done all of this. You just need to get it down on paper. And it will make you both more confident, and it's going to make you a better employee at your next job.
Sharon, we went over some tips on our last podcast that we talked about, and maybe it would be worth repeating those again and kind of incorporating some tips on accomplishment statements.
Okay. So I think the biggest tip that we talked about was be truthful. Well, it's kind of the flip side of this. Be truthful, but don't hide your light under a bushel. Right. So when you look at accomplishment statements, basically that's both truthful and letting your light shine. And that's really what this is all about. The other tip is, and again, this relates directly to accomplishments. You'll understand the employer's needs better if you understand how you can help that employer. So I think that's really important. And then, last but not least, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely.
That's what Employment for Seniors is here for. Many other agencies, there are very good people in private practice that help people write their resumes. So just reach out, ask for help. Don't try to go it alone.
And really see your job search as a continuum of steps and bits and pieces that need to be drawn in together, and that all of the research you're doing on employers, all of the thought you're putting into your resume, the practicing that you're doing on your interviewing, it's going to make you a better job seeker and much more successful working for a company that you truly want to work for.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Sharon, thank you. This has been great. We hope all the listeners have gotten a lot of great information about doing resumes. If you're in Central Ohio, 50 and over, you are more than welcome to contact Employment for Seniors for some help. And as Sharon said, there are a lot of other agencies. We can also help you find them. So again, 4 parts to our podcast series. We hope you listen to all 4. And thank you again for joining us today.
Circle270media.com.